Hello and welcome to All in Motion. I am your host, Jake. This is episode 26, Veteran Substance Abuse. I want to thank you to my guest. He's a criminal defense attorney with his own practice, very successful here in Northern Virginia. He's represented me before, and I've consulted with him on different matters. This is a very powerful and special episode to me personally and to other veterans I can speak for that served with me and in combat. I've used alcohol to deal with PTSD, to numb the pain, to escape reality, for sure. So, again, want to say thank you to my guest for his time. This attorney enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps weeks after graduating from high school. He served with the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit in Okinawa, Japan, and with the headquarters and service battalion at Quantico, Virginia. He started attending Northern Virginia Community College, working on his associates in applied science and administration of justice. He graduated cum laude from Northern Virginia Community College on the same day he exited the Marine Corps. After graduation, he joined the Loudoun County Commonwealth Attorney's Office as an assistant Commonwealth attorney, prosecuting an array of criminal cases from DWI, DUI offenses to robbery. He was recipient of the 2006 Victim Witness Award and had the opportunity to work cold cases, homicide cases, alongside Loudoun County Sheriff's Office investigators. He also advised the Loudoun County Narcotics Unit. Before starting his own law practice, he worked at one of Northern Virginia's preeminent boutique litigation firms, Bose Law Firm. He continues to serve as a legal advisor to a local municipal police department and has written on a number of topics related to Virginia criminal defense. He has been profiled in the New York Times business section in December of 2011. He's an experienced trial attorney and has been recognized by the National Trial Lawyers Association, Top 100 Super Lawyers, Rising Stars, 2014 to present, and is a member of the National College of DUI Defense. Ladies and gentlemen, Attorney David Dischley. Attorney Dischley, welcome to All in Motion. How are we doing, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Thank you for taking the time to sit down with All in Motion today. Hey, so before we get into what we're speaking about this evening, do you mind just telling the audience a little bit about who you are, what you do, and where you're from?
Sure. My name's David Dischley, the managing partner at Dischley Law. I'm originally from Long Island, New York, but I live in Warrenton, Virginia now. I practice throughout Northern Virginia, from Arlington all the way out to Winchester, and I specialize in criminal defense.
Could you please talk about what made you want to pursue a career in law?
So ironically, it was in the Marine Corps that made me want to pursue a career in law. I was a corporal working for a major down at Quantico that was in law school, and I was the branch clerk. And we had a bunch of Marines that were actually getting admin SEP for failing drug screens. And ironically, they would come to me for a little bit of advice, and at least 3 of those Marines were able to separate the Marine Corps before being admin SEP based on certain rules and regulations. So advising them through that process really made me want to become a criminal defense attorney.
Great. And you just walked right into that next question is, while you were in the Marine Corps, did you experience any enlisted or officer experience substance abuse? And you already answered that, but if you want to go a little bit more into detail, please.
Yeah, when I was in the big issue plaguing everybody was marijuana. I mean, I watched guys while we were in Okinawa, Japan, pop on piss tests for marijuana. I watched guys with alcohol issues get in trouble, and a lot of these people, had their staff NCOs or NCOs had, seen the warning signs, they would have never found themselves in the situations that they were in. So again, seeing it in the Marine Corps, seeing some of the senior enlisted guys suffering with that. I didn't have a lot of experience with officers since I was just a Lance Corporal in the Marine Corps, seeing them experience those issues. But again, my fellow Marines that were the same rank as me or a little bit higher, a lot of them struggled with substance abuse issues.
Right. And you and I have spoke about this before in the past. You probably obviously doing, before law, but I also experienced unfortunately, a lot of good soldiers that unfortunately got other than honorable discharge and got removed from the military. So it kind of just walks right into the other one. With marijuana being legal now in most states for medical use, and most of a lot of states decriminalizing, and then a lot of states for recreation use. What are your thoughts on that still happening with the OTH? And because I know few guys try to get jobs in the civilian world, and it's very difficult.
Yeah, I think the other than honorable discharge is a little harsh for guys that are using marijuana in states where it's legal. I understand that the federal law still makes it illegal, so I kind of have a split view on that, because if it's illegal federally, then it's enforceable under the UCMJ and under federal law. But when it's legal in the state and the guys can go out and use it, it really creates issues when they're being admin cept for that. I think there's other avenues that the military could take to rehabilitate those people instead of just kicking them out. Marijuana. I had one client tell me the other day, he's actually just gotten into a veterans docket in Fairfax, that's his medicine. He doesn't want to take Prozac. He doesn't want to be on, other anti-anxiety medication. So marijuana works for him. And for a lot of people, that's the case. And I see that throughout my practice, especially with veterans that are suffering from PTSD coming back from Afghanistan, Iraq, that they're self-medicating with marijuana and it's actually working. There's even some programs where they're treating PTSD with mushrooms, under very controlled environments, but they're experimenting with that and taking them back through the trauma that caused the PTSD, and they're having great success. So again, I think the military's position on marijuana as it relates to being admin cept, again, I think there's a rehabilitation aspect, because you have a lot of good soldiers, Marines, airmen, sailors that are going to get out. They're going to get a BCD or an OTH, depending on the level of the substance that they're using, and the military is actually doing themselves a disservice by putting them out. It creates a lot of issues for the guys. I have a young Marine who got a DUI and then failed a drug test for cocaine, and they're putting them out and they're recommending an OTH. And this guy's he's a decent Marine. He's somebody I look at and I'd say I'd go to combat with you, but he failed one drug screen, and they sent him to Texas. They did the rehabilitation. They spent all that time and money on him, but they're still putting him out. It's sometimes doesn't make sense.
What are your thoughts? I believe Oregon now has decriminalized, and for recreation use, mushrooms are legal. And there's a lot of positive. To your point, I just wanted to shed a little bit of light on that. To your point you brought about mushrooms, there's a lot of good results that are coming back for treating people with severe depression or military members that have severe PTSD. And what I want to get your thoughts about, in a controlled environment, obviously it's not the FDA, it's against the law, but there are, I know out in Arizona, there's one I saw, ketamine and treat like ayahuasca, and then mushrooms like we spoke about. Do you believe that right now it's just in a controlled setting, they're legal to treat, but technically it's not obviously illegal? What are your thoughts on those type of treatments?
It's interesting because in my job, I talk to a lot of vets who have they've done a lot of research on it, and so some of them will use. And I want to use the technical term for mushrooms, but I always butcher it every time I say it. It's like psilocybin. There's a lot of guys that use it, and and they're reading these articles. They're reading the medical journals that are talking about it, and they're having less problems because they're using it. But again, because it's illegal, they find themselves in the criminal justice system, and that creates problems for them with work, or with benefits through the VA. So it's kind of a mixed bag in terms of how somebody can use these substances to treat or self-medicate. And because there's such a stigma around going to a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Most of the guys I served with, we weren't touchy-feely people. We weren't talking about our feelings, but these are conversations that we would have. And if it works, it's hard to tell somebody to stop doing it unless the law actually prohibits it. So again, it's one of those issues that I wish I could get under control or get the VA to be involved in a lot more of these studies. Again, I've heard of one particular study down in Texas where they were doing in a very controlled environment, administering mushrooms to former service members, but current service members that were in that program could not partake in that study, in that treatment, because they would get kicked out.
What makes you really passionate about wanting to serve and defend veterans, that specifically veterans that have substance abuse disorders?
So, it probably started when I was a prosecutor. I'd get a Marine or, somebody that was going in the Marine Corps, and, they'd come in front of me and they'd be charged with a crime that was based off of a substance abuse disorder, a theft offense or, possession of marijuana back when it was illegal. I was a prosecutor during then. And, a lot of these convictions really hinder a person's ability to get in the military, or once they get out of the military, get a good job despite their military service. So you got guys that are, served honorably, have an honorable discharge, they get out, and again, they're dealing with personal issues. Because I always say the military messes you up, in a good way and a bad way. When it comes to, being able to fight for your country and, do the job that we have to do as military members, it puts you in the right frame of mind. But when you get out in the civilian world, some of those skills don't necessarily equate. And it's amazing how 4 years can change an entire life. I know that's happened to me. And seeing these guys who have served honorably, they were willing to put on a uniform, go overseas, and then, because of issues that they dealt with in the military, or, issues that they went through, even divorces, losing children. And, again, not typically the type of guys that are going to run to a psychiatrist or a psychologist and get on the proper medication. Plus, the medication doesn't help, in certain circumstances. So you see these people with substance abuse issues come before you time and time again. And I call it self-medicating. Again, other people are going to call it different things, but they're trying to deal with their emotional issues that they're not necessarily open to talking about. So when you get somebody like that in the criminal justice system, you have a really good person who has served their country. And when you peel back the onion and look at their background, you're looking at somebody who could be very successful with the skills that they got from the military, the skills that they've acquired after the military, but for the substance abuse issue that's holding them back. So, my mantra is always, I want somebody to be better off, having met me, and be in a better position after they met me than before. And most military guys, they'll follow the instructions that I give them. They'll follow, treatment plans that we put together for them, obviously with the help of professionals. And you can show that to a prosecutor and really lay out a compelling case for them not to go forward. And in Virginia, we've had so many law changes in the last about 2 years after the George Floyd incident and during COVID, that they actually gave us some tools that allow the prosecutors to defer cases for a dismissal, as opposed to prior to 2020. The options were limited. But I mean, the results that I can produce for a military member, if I'm able to articulate what they've gone through in the military, the awards that they've gotten, and how their life has kind of progressed since they got out, prosecutors are very receptive to that. And thank God, because they do cherish the work that the military does, and cops are receptive to it too. So when you can lay that out, it's really gratifying to help somebody or save a career.
That's awesome, man. I just want to get into this a little bit because I believe it's important to look at our past conflicts and wars that we've been in. So during the summer and fall of 1971 in Vietnam, drug use by United States service members, by all estimates, reached an epidemic proportion, and this is primarily heroin. Studies conducted within the population. This is a study out of 13,760, approximately 1,400 had been found to have unresponsive or yes for narcotics at the time of departure. From this subpopulation who had shown positive urines at the departure from Vietnam, a random sample of 495 was selected. The drug positive, those testing positive for opioids. We've been in two conflicts now, as you and I both know, from OIF and OEF for the past 20 years. Why is it so important in our country that we bring awareness to substance abuse disorder for all the veterans?
Yeah, I was born in a time where most of the cops that were in my area, where I grew up in New York, were Vietnam vets, and developed friendships with a lot of guys that were Vietnam vets. And the stuff that they saw in Vietnam, and again, the stuff that our guys, for the last 20 years have been seeing in Iraq, Afghanistan, wherever they've served, I think it tends to lead itself to wanting to numb yourself of what you've seen, and what you've been through. You're losing buddies, you're getting shot at, you're seeing people get severely hurt. And so substance abuse is a way that, and I don't want to call it substance abuse, substance use is a way that people kind of deal with that type of trauma. So in Vietnam, heroin was everywhere. The Vietnam vets that I talked to, they said, a lot, I think those numbers are probably a little low compared to the people I spoke to, that talking about how many people were using heroin overseas. Haven't seen the guys come back. I mean, I see a lot of alcohol, methamphetamines, cocaine is on the rise. We got fentanyl in almost everything, press Xanax that's coming in from outside the country. So, but it's a way for people to cope with the trauma that they dealt with. And again, not being, I'm not the most touchy-feely guy, to go to counseling and really talk through those issues. People just, I think that our veterans just want to forget. And so they turn to these substances to forget. And it becomes recreational at first. They use it, maybe, once a month, and then, they start craving that feeling again. It's unfortunate because I've probably lost about 10 former service members to either overdoses or suicide in the last 2 years. I think that number's a lot. And when you're trying to help these guys and you've laid out a treatment plan and you've laid out how you're going to help them, once they get into, whether it's heroin, whether it's methamphetamines, whether it's Xanax, and they get a little bit of that fentanyl in them, again, people are, you can't control what's going to happen in that scenario. So, I think bringing these substance abuse disorders bringing awareness to substance abuse disorders among veterans, making sure, when I was in, we had these things called tap and TAM classes when we got out, and nobody talked about, substance abuse and, the issues you were going to deal with when you became a civilian. Now, I don't know if that's changed. I got out in 2000, so maybe they've done a little bit better with that. But, if people know what to expect and they know the services that are out there, a lot of people are going to go get them. But when you got to jump through the hoops, when it takes you 6 to 9 months to get in with the VA, to deal with a PTSD issue, or you're trying to get, a disability rating based on your PTSD, or, other medical conditions, you're gonna self-medicate. You may not have access to the pain pills that you need. You may not have access, and that's been a huge issue. I mean, guys with back issues getting out, guys, that were severely injured, they're put on a pain regimen, they get out, and then their regular doctors won't prescribe them. When we look at there's a state database in Virginia, and I believe it exists in every state, and the acronym is the PMPs. When a doctor is more concerned about, the level of benzos or narcotics that you're getting prescribed instead of putting you through an actual treatment plan. But a lot of it is also, I've represented doctors that use their medical license as a license to prescribe narcotics to people, and I've seen them get prosecuted. And, so I think the more awareness we bring to veterans getting out and, the issues that they're going to face, the less they're going to fall into these traps or, find themselves with a shady doctor who's going to overprescribe, an opioid. And again, there's a lot of legislation, there's a lot of work being done in the civilian sector to make sure that we're keeping people off it, because it affects everyone. It just seems like our military guys who have served our country, we would think that they were going to gravitate away from it, and a lot of them gravitate towards it if they feel like they need it to deal with the trauma that they saw while they were overseas. And again, a lot of these people, we want in the civilian sector, we want working, we don't want to see them in jails, and we don't want to see them, in the criminal justice system or dealing, homeless or dealing with substance abuse issues. So again, I think making the resources a little more accessible, could certainly help.
Our country, I get it, right? The country's flooded in Mexico, China with fentanyl, and it comes to the States. In this country,
that's correct. Yeah, the fentanyl is a nasty substance, and I don't think anybody goes out there and goes, yeah, I want to get some fentanyl. Actually, I think people that are using heroin, and again, we're finding it in cocaine, we're finding it in Xanax pills. It's everywhere now. So I just had a client's certificate of analysis come back today where he had cocaine and fentanyl in his system. And
wow.
I was expecting the cocaine. I wasn't expecting the fentanyl.
He didn't tell you about the fentanyl? He didn't tell you about the fentanyl?
He didn't know about the fentanyl.
Oh, he didn't know. Oh, he didn't know it was laced with fentanyl. Like cocaine was laced
exactly.
with fentanyl.
And that's the problem. People think they're buying cocaine and it's cut with fentanyl, and
right.
And again, I don't know who the master designer of that is, or if it's just cheaper to, cut it with fentanyl and, give people a certain effect, or if people are trying to get them hooked on fentanyl. When you have to tell your friends who, get Xanax, to be careful not to buy it on the street, because, again, I don't know if you're familiar with pressed Xanax, which is, the pills that are made outside the country, mostly using fentanyl, to be careful about that, because it looks like a Xanny bar, and it could be straight fentanyl, and you could take the same amount that you always take a Xanax and overdose because it's fentanyl. So, I mean, fentanyl is just a nasty, nasty substance. And, non-military members that I've represented, I mean, I've lost probably about 15 in the last 3 years, to, the opioid epidemic, and someone overdosed and thinking they were doing heroin, and, they did fentanyl. And actually people that were doing really good and just relapsed once, so I've got a client who's sitting in, unfortunately, federal penitentiary right now because he handed a bag of heroin to his best friend, and, his best friend used it, and it had too much fentanyl in it, and had he kept that bag, he would have, been the one who was dead. But, they charged him with a homicide offense, and, he got some federal prison time out of it, a substance that they possessed instead of one, because the prosecutor can. And then you put that in front of a judge and you say the word fentanyl, they're putting people in jail, to, curtail that issue. So it's really a problem, especially in our criminal justice system, especially for, our service members that are using, to deal with their issues. So, and that's typically what I see amongst our service members. They're not the ones out there dealing it. I've had a couple of clients that, they were dealers, but, again, most of them were facilitating it, I'm going to say, as an accommodation. They weren't really making money off of it. They were just their friends needed it. They had their plug, and so they were just middlemen in it. But they get tied up with too much on them, and they end up getting lengthy prison sentences over it. So it's it's a problem, because I know, like Marines, we always look out for other Marines. So I had a client in Arlington that all he was doing was helping another Marine, right? He had a plug, the guy hooked him up with some cocaine, he gave it to this other guy, that was a Marine, but the dude ended up ratting on him. And I say rat, he ended up getting caught up with the police, and then he set up the other guy. So again, you see these things happen, and you ask yourself, like, how can we stop this from happening? How can we get these guys before they find themselves in these situations? And again, that's just access to the VA and access to medical benefits. So because a lot of some of these guys can't work, they're on disability, or they've got their disability, but they don't know all the resources that are available to them at the VA.
Right. And I just want to be clear, just as so it says, just Googled really quickly, Thursday, October 26, 2017, President Trump officially declared the opioid crisis a public health emergency. President Trump said from the White House that this epidemic is a national health emergency. So I believe, I think when I believe Obama did do something, but that's, that's what it looks like from here.
Well, I think, like all of us, 2020 right. feels like it's gone on for the last 4 years. So
yeah, right.
No, I know. I just remember back that far.
Right. One quick thing I want to circle back around to. I almost forgot. There was something I heard about. We were speaking about the last question. I want to tie it really quickly before we move on. What you and I just spoke about. If we go to war, you gotta pay for these guys. You like you said, in combat. I've been in combat. You gotta pay for those. Those guys to go. We look back at history, and they're gonna be severe mental problems potentially for a lot of these guys.
To me, I don't know how you can go through that experience and not come out of it with with issues. And my grandfather was a World War II vet. He was in the Navy. He was involved in the bombing of Okinawa. He was involved in the beach landing at Iwo Jima. And he never really talked about what he experienced overseas and what he saw. And I don't think they were any different than us. I think they were just better at hiding it than we were. He wasn't a drinker because his dad was an alcoholic, but it wasn't until he passed away at 93 a couple of years ago that the last time I saw him, we talked for 3 hours about his military service.
And he shared with you details?
He shared with me some of the details of where he served. I never knew it as a kid. I never knew it even when I was in the Marine Corps and I'd see him. But then he started opening up, when he was, unfortunately close to death, and the stuff that they saw and the stuff that they went through. And again, I'm shocked that they call it the greatest generation, that they didn't have more issues. But I think if you peeled back the onion a little more and looked at it, a lot of them were probably alcoholics, functioning alcoholics. They were able to, work and drink. I mean, I remember hearing stories growing up in New York of, friends of mine's parents that worked at bars, and the bars would open at 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. There'd be a line of guys outside that needed their beer in their shop before they went to work, and so again, I think it was a little more socially acceptable, but as society kind of said, all right, drugs are bad, alcohol is bad, and started really waging the war on drugs, which, is a war that's, can't be won because people are going to do it no matter what. You start seeing these things. So in the 80s, when I think it was Reagan that declared the war on drugs, and then they increased mandatory minimum sentences and they really started cracking down. That's when we saw people really, come to the limelight of, how much of a problem this was.
Well, yeah. And you just brought up a really good point. I want to get your opinion on this. I was just thinking about it. And both my grandfathers, they're both, in World War II, they're both officers. The one served more in combat than the other. But I just feel like when we got bombed at Pearl Harbor, right? Like the nation, yeah, women that were working in factories, we became like, I don't know over history, just from what I know, the nation became like together, right? But then you look at the Vietnam War, and these guys came back home. They're getting spit on. They're getting stuff thrown at them. So I just want to see. And we kind of just talked about it, but and it's pretty self-explanatory. Anybody can Google this, right? But just want to
Yeah.
see if you have any thoughts about that.
Well, again, I think when, same thing after 9/11, like how the nation came together and how everybody was, willing to go into Iraq, even if it was, now we know, there may have been some bad information about that and everything, but I think you had at the time in World War II, people were so distraught over the fact that Pearl Harbor was bombed, that they were lining up to enlist. They were lying about their ages so they could get in, and nobody was checking on them. I think when you have an all volunteer military, and I think that's the difference with the Vietnam War is you had the 60s, right? And so peace, love, and you had the draft. I could tell you the draft, affected my family. My uncle, my mom's brother, he was married, he got divorced, and he did the right thing. He notified, the draft board or whoever it was that he got divorced, and that changed his draft number. And within 3 months of changing his draft number, he was, drafted into the army. And unfortunately he died in Vietnam. And but you know, I'll never forget this one guy I worked with at Quantico, because he spoke about this a lot, that people would literally spit on him in the airport. They were calling them baby killers. People weren't behind that war. And, again, I think it was, more of the social, cues of the times that, we were getting involved in somebody else's problem, as opposed to World War II, where it was like, hey, they brought the fight to us. And again, the same with 9/11, they brought the fight to us. So, we were going to go take the fight to them, because, how many people enlisted after 9/11? I remember watching the Twin Towers, get hit. And I remember sitting there going, I had only been out of the Marine Corps for about a year at that point, and I was ready to go back in. So I think when our homeland's attacked, people respond differently than when we're just going to fight the communists, or we're going to try to stop the spread of communism. Again, I think that was a lot of the issue with, Afghanistan. And, again, when some of the intel started coming to light on, Iraq, why people kind of stop supporting, the efforts over there, even though, what the Taliban does in Afghanistan is horrible, to the society over there. And if you talk to a lot of Afghanis that are here that supported the US war effort, they love America, and they love the fact that the Americans took care of them. And, I actually have quite a few clients that, supported that are, Afghan natives that now living in the United States that supported the U.S. war effort over there. And, again, they didn't support what was going on in their own country. So, society is going to swing with whatever, however the news media is pushing it. Again, I like going down the rabbit hole a little bit, but the media can certainly drive attention, to an issue. And Vietnam was the first televised war. People would see the movie reels during World War II if they went to the movies, but you could turn on the nightly news and see news broadcasts of what was going on in Vietnam. And I think that affected people and their perception of what was going on over there. It's not over for them, and a lot of effort goes into making sure that those resources are available for them. Now, some of the guys that I served with that were, had rough childhoods and experienced a lot of things, made some of the best Marines and soldiers and, sailors and airmen that are out there. But again, when they get out and they decide to move on, I think sometimes they lose their purpose, and some of those traumas come back. And again, they revert back to that self-medication. I just had a client of mine who unfortunately overdosed and passed away about 3 months ago. And the his story was so sad. And the only time that he spoke of his past with some joy was his military experience.
Wow.
But prior to that, again, broken home, family members dying at a young age. After that, drug addiction, in and out of rehab, and almost a hopelessness to him. But when you talk to him about his time in the military, he would smile, he would laugh, he would talk about his buddies. So again, I think it gives some people a sense of purpose. But when you end that and you get out, again, I think they realize that the civilian world isn't all it's cracked up to be. I mean, and obviously not everybody wants to stay in and do 20 or 30 years. So it's kind of when I look at it and I'm looking back, you go, how did people not see the warning signs? But then again, when people are going through it, and they don't have a strong support system, and their buddies, they're masking it from their friends and they're hiding it. Again, sometimes it's really hard to see the signs of the substance abuse issue that these people are going through. But I think a childhood trauma coupled with, the trauma that some people experience in the military, I think they're going to be a higher risk than most people. And again, in my experience, that's what I've seen. A childhood trauma, the military trauma. When those thoughts become overwhelming, you want to silence them. How do you silence them? Substances help. We medicate almost everyone in society, whether it's legal medication through doctors and, Xanax, Klonopin, the slew of benzos and antidepressants that are out there. I mean, almost everybody I speak to is on something, and so we become a society that becomes dependent upon that. And then you meet people that aren't on it and you go, wow, man, you should be on some medication because, they're really hyper or they're really anxious or they, you can see the ADHD in them or, and, that's why I think, mindfulness, and, even meditating for like 10 minutes a day. I don't do it. I wish I had the time to do it, but the studies have shown that is kind of the best way, to deal with things. And when you see people that actually practice that and are doing yoga, I have a lawyer friend of mine in Vegas that is probably the happiest person I know that, and he doesn't drink, doesn't do drugs, doesn't do anything, but he's like a yoga freak, and it just clears his mind. And, again, he's a very joyful person. So, but I think there's addictions in everything. I think everybody trades off one thing for another, whether it's exercise, healthy eating, driving in their car, drinking a beer, whatever brings you joy, you're going to do. It's when it starts disrupting your life that it becomes an addiction issue. And I'll just touch on one additional thing. I have the best man at my wedding, a very good friend of mine. He's that type of guy that can come home after a day of work and drink 6 beers, and, he'll wake up the next day and he'll go to work and he doesn't have a problem, and, I wouldn't dare say he has a substance abuse issue, but if he went to a counselor and said, yeah, I drink 6 beers a day, they're going to classify him as having a substance abuse disorder. So, again, people can get classified with that when they can actually control what they're doing and it doesn't disrupt their life. So, there becomes that question as to when is it disruptive and when does it become an addiction?
We do isolate. I mean, one of the interviewees that I interviewed, he was also in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we, I can speak for a lot of veterans, and I'm sure So I just want to get your thoughts also on that as well.
I just went through a situation with a very close friend of mine who, it was about, he's actually still in the Army, and he, when he got out of a line unit and he came to Northern Virginia, he couldn't handle it. And he isolated and he was drinking and, causing huge issues with his family. And, he's coming out of it now, but he's still struggling with it. I think they don't feel like anybody can relate to them. One of the things I loved about the Marine Corps, if you were bored, you just walk to your neighbor's room in the barracks, and knock on the door and be like, hey, you want to hang out, and play video games or whatever you guys were going to do. And, you could talk with them about or joke with them about things that aren't appropriate in regular society. So I think, a lot of veterans isolate because they don't feel that people understand what they went through. And even the thought of going to like a support group where they're going to be with other veterans who have been through what they've been through, usually they got to be dragged, kicking and screaming to it, because I think, most people think, all right, I can handle this on my own, or I can, I'm tough enough where I can deal with this. And so they turn inward and, again, they're battling those demons on their own instead of reaching out for someone to help, and again, it's just, like I said, I'm not a touchy feeling person to talk about my feelings. I shut down and I go internal, and, when something's bothering me, and I think a lot of military members are like that.
That's great. I appreciate it. This one might be a little heavy, but it's personal to me. But this is from mental health from the VA.gov. I've looked at this before. I was going to do it an earlier episode, but I'm glad I have the opportunity to really speak on it now and get your thoughts on it as well, also being a veteran. This is from the 2019, the one I still, I don't know why they haven't updated like a 2021 or at least 2020, but veteran suicide rates are at all-time high. The 2021 report from the VA stated that in 2019, there was an average of 17.2 suicides per day. And just wanted to get your thoughts on that, because a lot of times we know a lot of suicides, there's a substance abuse problem before the actual suicide.
And these suicide to me is one of the tragedies, especially when a veteran commits suicide. You make it through what being in Iraq, being in Afghanistan, and and then you come home only to take your own life. And a lot of these guys are heroes that are doing that, and it's the trauma that they experienced over there. It's the adjustment back to again, civilian life. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jay. I mean, some people like being in combat, and the absence of having that.
Not to you all know, not real quick. I mean, it's a, I don't mean sound, not to interrupt you to sound crazy, but it's a crazy, and I don't want to say I'm this way. It's a crazy adrenaline rush. And I know it's like a lot of people would say I'm psychotic, probably.
Well, I think the average.
I'm not saying that's me, but I know other guys. Yeah, I know a lot of guys. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I know guys that all they come back from a tour overseas and all they could do is find a way to go back over. I mean, or they get out and join one of these private military companies so they can go back over. I have two friends that volunteered to go to Ukraine, and again, a lot of people would be like, "You're crazy. Why do you want to do that?" And it becomes something that they it's their way of life. I mean, even when you go back, and look at Vietnam, I mean, you had guys that didn't want to rotate back, they just wanted to stay over there, and they couldn't adjust. And, so I to me, suicide is the epitome of hopelessness, right? So, nothing's ever going to get better. Nothing's, my life is pointless the way it is. And, you make that decision because of all that pain that you're suffering. Maybe a relationship, went bad because of substance abuse issues based on your service. And, you start, you just get so inside of yourself that, the hopelessness is unbearable. And, again, you're talking to a guy who, has driven friends to, Fairfax Hospital or Prince William Hospital because of threats that they've made. I mean, you take them serious, but a lot of people say, "Oh no, he's not going to do that," or "He's not going to follow through on it," and and they do. And veterans, most of us like having firearms around, and and again, it's such a shame because they make it through probably one of the hardest things that anybody could go through in their life, and then they come back here and again they just lose themselves or lose hope, or just find life unbearable, and and they want to end it. And and substance abuse is a big part in that. I think a lot of people will use a substance to build up the courage to do it. I think it releases the inhibitors that normally would stop you from doing it, or say no, I'm going to do this. You have a couple of beers, you get a little loose, and you're upset, and and then you take an action that maybe you don't think is going to be permanent. Again, it's so, I'm not an expert on psychology or anything like that, but again, I think substance abuse plays a big role in veteran suicide, because I think if we again look back at the history there, you're going to see the warning signs of a substance abuse issue. You're going to see mental health issues, obviously mental health issues, and and cries for help before they actually take that step. And people just aren't in tune to recognizing, like, hey, this person needs help.
Thank you again, Attorney Dischley, for taking the time to sit down with All Emotion, sir. And also, thank you for your service to our country. And just want to say thank you, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to sit down with All Emotion. And thank you to our audience for taking the time to listen to this powerful episode. It's been 1 year. All Emotion is going strong. We've been doing it for over a year now. So just want to say thank you all for being patient. Also just want to say please follow All Emotion on Instagram. And listen to our amazing other episodes that we have with amazing guests on Spotify, Apple, Google, YouTube, and many more. We have big things coming your way for 2023 that we're planning. And like I said, again, it's been over a year, and it's awesome. This has been powerful, ups and downs, but definitely an amazing experience. So I just want to, to all my interviewees and guests, thank you all for being patient and sitting down with All Emotion. And again, Attorney Dischley, look forward to having you back here soon. We love feedback, so please let us know how we're doing. You can message All Emotion Podcast on Instagram, or you can send an email to Jacob, that's my first name, Juliet, Alpha, Charlie, Oscar, Bravo, at allemotionpodcast.net. This is Jake from All Emotion. Happy holidays, everybody. Take care and be safe.